Go on, go on, go on, it's working. It's working. Is it? It looks like it's thinking about it. This is definitely the screen. This is not me.
It is.
It's there. Go on, go on. Yes! Right, operating systems. Let's move this on a little bit quicker. When you have traditional operating systems, who has installed an operating system, like on their computer? Right, awesome. Okay, so quite a few people here. So you get your box product, you go down to Byte Computers, you get a disk. You put your disk in your computer, obviously not, you don't put your disk in your hard disk, but you put your disk in your computer, and that disk is going to have a load of files on it. Those files are going to, can you tell I'm speeding up to be able to make up some time? Those files are just going to spew onto that disk, you're going to restart, and you're going to get Windows, or Mac, or I suppose you don't do Mac often, do you? But you get Linux or anything like that, any operating system. It tends to be like that. The important thing is, you've just spewed a load of files onto the disk, you've restarted, you can read and write to that disk as a user. As we moved on, we started restricting that a little bit more, but the disk was still writable. Problem, everyone can write to this. So, when you install install applications, all that does is that unzips a load of stuff, goes and puts it on the disk. When you're as a user, you're working on it, you're doing it. COVID-19 can write to your disk. One of the problems here, who here has heard the rule that, and it's probably not really relevant anymore, but at least back in the day, that you need to reinstall your operating system every 6 months or so? Yeah, some of you, yeah. And the reason for that really is because what would happen is you would start with this known good configuration, this thing that has been published by the software vendor. And over time, you would drift away from it because you've gone, you've done stuff on it. You've followed some guides from somebody. You've installed something that thinks it knows better than Microsoft or Red Hat or whoever, and has gone and modified some base part of the operating system. And it's popped up saying, hey, give us administrator rights because we need to do this. And you've given it administrator rights because you're like, it must know what it's doing. And then before long, you've just gone further and further down the path of a very, very messy computer. And then the only thing you can do is you can blow it away, right? So like we've got our options. One is to like try and work our way through our computer. You ever done that? Like you installed CCleaner or things like that, or you had to do it with your parents' computers and stuff like that, and you had to dig through it. It's really messy. Let's be fair, what we do is we save all our stuff that we think was important, we reinstall the operating system, we put it back. There is a better way. And the better way is immutable operating systems. And the beauty of an immutable operating system is that you just don't let anyone write anything. You install it, you make it read-only, you don't let anything write to it. This used to say happy birthday. Can you tell that I wrote this quite quickly? I just knocked off the birthday. Everyone's happy. That seems great, right? Because I've got this verified installation. And I can say, you know what? I know that nothing has broken about this because, you know, no one's able to write to it, so nothing could have gone wrong. Can anyone tell me what the problems might be with that?
Might be a pain to install software if your disk is read-only.
Yes. Yes.
And also, perhaps, are we talking like fully read-only?
Yeah.
You can't. Well, how do you save a document to a read? Would you have to like save your documents to the cloud then, or
reasonable? These are all reasonable questions.
firmware updates?
Yeah, firmware updates. Yeah, well, you wouldn't be able to download the firmware updates to put it on your disk.
Yeah.
Can anyone think of any devices for which that doesn't really matter?
Something that's embedded.
Phones is an interesting one. I'm going to dive back to that. But we do save things to phones, don't we? Yeah. Game console, that's an interesting one as well. In fact,
And you have like games that you put on it.
yeah.
What about
Thin clients, yeah, that's an interesting one because if you just have some software that's just running on it and then it will just connect to a third party or something like that and just everything's stored in memory. The example I've always given, by the way, this would have been funny if I'd have put this on about 20 seconds ago, but I didn't, so oh well. The example I always give is smart devices. Your smart device. If anyone who was here last month. It's funny actually, because I think it's interesting. We're going to cycle through 3 people before we get some. Anyway, last month I talked about my robot vacuum cleaner. and how it was sending things up to the cloud, and how I hacked that. But a lot of smart devices now are actually immutable. So what that means is when you set up when the thing's set up, it gets verified software or firmware that's been deployed to the smart fridge, for example, and it can't be changed. So that thing that I talked about earlier, that actually works really well because it just keeps any data in memory or sends it up to the cloud. I will say lots and lots of smart devices don't do that and are not that smart and are actually really, really insecure. However, good smart devices that are well designed tend to use this idea of an immutable operating system. But immutable operating systems aren't just for fridges. This, can you tell that I wrote this about a couple of hours ago? This is actually something to do with that's being done currently in the cloud. If you don't work in the cloud or anything like this, don't worry about it. This is an interesting slide, but it might go over your head and click with you in a couple of months. And I'll get off of this as quickly as possible, I promise. But an interesting thing that we're doing in the cloud right now is that we've got these immutable operating systems. You might have heard of AWS BottleRocket, CoreOS, or Flatcar Linux. These are completely immutable. The idea is that you deploy these operating systems to a cloud thing somewhere in the cloud, in a data center, and it always and only runs it never gets updated. We don't update it, we just delete it and we just create another one. And then what these operating systems will do is they'll have some way of you embedding a container. If you don't know what a container is, I'll do a talk on that another day. And we won't talk about it too much more, I promise. But you can embed a container within there and that will have your application within it. Shoot that up to the cloud, like a rocket, and you don't have to worry about anybody, any malware, any malcontent getting in there, because it can't do anything, because it's completely immutable. What immutable devices do you have already, apart from smart fridges?
Unbelievably simple, like a digital clock.
Yeah, so those are going to be basic things. I'm talking about...
Pocket calculator.
Okay. What devices with immutable operating systems do you have? Sorry?
Cars.
Cars? I would love that to be the case. Car security is really, really bad, but that would be a great use for it.
Pocket calculator.
It doesn't generally run an operating system unless it's a graphing calculator. And I can't imagine. There's something in your pocket right now. Your phones. Lots and lots of phones nowadays kind of work like this. So have you ever installed an update on your phone and it has to restart, right? Mm-hmm. As a fun fact, what happens is it can't write to the operating system part of the phone. So what it does is it writes instead to another area of the disk, a verified update, and then it reboots into that update. So nothing on your phone can write to like your operating system, Android, and the same kind of thing works with macOS, with the iOS. It can't actually write to that area. What it has to do is it has to reboot into it. It has to be a verified chain of stuff to allow you to boot into that new one. Otherwise, it will boot into the old one. And so we've got this problem that you were describing earlier, which is how do we handle this? Well, the way we handle this is that we only lock down parts of it, and you were getting to that, and you were spoiling the later part of it. So. We obviously still use mutable space for user data and stuff like that, but we segregate that off. And with applications, of course, the beauty of phones, of course, Steve Jobs, originally the plan was to completely sandbox all your apps by not letting you install apps in the first place. Did you know that the first iPhone wasn't meant to have apps? You were just meant to use HTML applications?
Yeah, YouTube came along like a year later. I
Yeah.
think it was a year before you could even put your own apps on the original iPhone 2G, something like
Exactly.
that.
And that was because the idea is that when they designed the iPhone, and then eventually this kind of caught on in Android space as well, is that you weren't going to have old style applications like they were on PCs, or like they are in many cases now on PCs. We're going to have tightly sandboxed applications that can only access certain things. So you've had your application on your phone pop up and say, we need to access your photos so that we can do this. This is sandbox. This is a sandbox. Look, this is high tech. So of course we've got all these apps which are on mutable parts of your disk, but they're tightly sandboxed. And they certainly cannot write to the operating system in the way that the Windows 95s and 98s and 2000s and Windows 7, 8, 10, and 11 can all write to those things if you ask for the right permissions. And yeah, no, everyone forgets about Vista. Problem with that on PCs is, on desktops, is that, of course, if we want to do this, then you've got that essential difference, right? On the phone side, well, we've only ever had applications. And of course, on Android, you might have noticed that those applications have been more and more locked down. If you've got an iPhone, you've noticed them slowly open up and up and up because they've taken opposite ends to that sandbox. We've always had that sandbox. On PCs, we haven't had that. There is this idea in some of our platforms of the universal window platform, for example, replacing traditional installers, but that's not really got there yet. And a lot of our applications require us to be able to do that sandboxing if we're going to be using immutable operating systems. So I'd like you to imagine a way of us getting an immutable operating system on our desktops, on our laptops, like we have on our phones, but still leveraging those legacy applications that still need to install. The way that you will do that is that you, the same way as you update your phone, whereas you write to some space and then you restart into it read-only, we're going to do the same, but for installing our applications. And so, for example, on Windows, you could use Universal Windows Platform, which is sandboxed, and still run those in sandboxes. But for all those other things, like Microsoft Office, which ironically doesn't run within these sandboxes, you can layer them on. So they're immutable, they're read-only, just like the operating system, you can't write to them. It does mean that you're going to have to restart every time you want to update one of those applications, but it also means you get that nice verifiability. You can check and you can go, right, these are definitely, I can trust that this is absolutely what was meant to be installed, nothing malicious has gotten into it. This is the end of the talk, basically. This is exactly what I'm using on my desktop now. This is what I'm using on my laptop. Is a variant of Linux called Fedora Silverblue. Who here uses desktop Linux, by the way? Okay, about a third of you, if I'm being generous. Who has tried using it and gone back to Windows? Okay, this is really cool. And this is a reason to reconsider using it if you're ever interested. Of course, you're going to have to do you. But ever since I've moved to this, I have never, and I've done this almost 2 years ago now, I've never reinstalled everything on my computer. Because I know absolutely that everything that I'm using is either sandboxed. There's a technology called Flatpak. It's up and coming. It's getting better every day. There are some problems with it, and some people hate it because of its. They see the sandboxing of the application as somehow infringing on their rights, which is crazy to me. I use containers as well. I won't talk about that too much here, but we use containers for anything that I can't do on the thing. But the base operating system, plus all the applications that haven't yet gotten into this sandboxed ecosystem, get layered on and get added immutably. And the advantage of this, I'm just going to skip to the end here, is that I can just trust my computer and get back to work. And I've got a command that I can run to say, is this, what is installed? And it will tell me exactly. It won't be, oh, you've got this installed, but we're not able to tell you about this other package that went and modified this or that or the other. And with the application sandboxing getting better all the time, is really handy. Right now, I get this hardening. So I know that my laptop right now, and this is running Silverblue, it's very nice, it works. The problems that you saw was with the screen, not my computer. I get this really hardened system. So I wanted to show you this, really, and there are a couple of others. So there's Vanilla OS, OpenSUSE MicroOS. Mac OS actually does a lot of this now. Microsoft is looking into this. They're having real problems with it, but Mac OS is kind of doing this as well. If you've noticed Macs particularly getting really, really reliable, that's why. So yeah, I would strongly recommend you go and explore them. And that was my talk. Right.